180 days. That is the number that explains everything about how serious this actually is. Not a precaution. Not standard post-fight protocol. The absolute maximum medical suspension the Association of Boxing Commissions is legally allowed to hand down. And it just landed on Ilia Topuria, the most dominant fighter in the lightweight division 4 months ago, now sitting at home unable to fully open his eyes, watching his own division reshape itself without him. Start with the number because it cuts through every carefully worded statement that has come out of his camp since the fight. 180 days, the maximum allowed under commission rules, plus a mandatory 60-day no-contact period that runs concurrently. In practical terms, Topuria cannot fight again until he is cleared specifically by an oral and maxillofacial surgeon, not a general physician, a specialist in jaw and facial reconstruction. That is the threshold he has to clear just to be allowed back near a training partner, let alone an opponent. And there is no exact timeline attached to that clearance. The 180 days is a floor, not a ceiling. If the 6-month scans show anything the specialist is not comfortable with, he stays out indefinitely beyond that. The injury list itself, once you actually sit with the clinical detail, explains why the commission reached for the maximum penalty available. Non-displaced fractures to both orbital bones, the bony sockets that house and protect each eyeball, with the right eye absorbing the majority of the damage. A broken nose. 3 distinct structural injuries to his face, and that count does not even include the cuts and the swelling that physically forced both eyes shut during the fight itself. Topuria confirmed the actual sequence himself, and it is worth hearing in his own words rather than secondhand. He lost vision in his right eye in the first round. By the end of the second round, his left eye was gone too. That means for the final 2 rounds of a 5-round championship fight, the most dominant lightweight in the world was completely blind. No depth perception. No peripheral vision. Just darkness, instinct, and punches he could not see coming. He was rushed to a Washington, D.C. hospital by ambulance before the official decision was even read inside the Octagon. Most fighters who lose a fight walk to the back, get checked by a ringside physician, maybe visit a hospital hours later if something feels wrong. Topuria did not have that option. He left the cage by ambulance. Dana White, standing at the post-fight podium, did not soften any of it. He said they got Topuria out of the Octagon before his hand was even raised, sent him straight to the hospital, and that his eye looked like a probable broken orbital. White was right, except it turned out to be both. The silence that followed the fight said almost as much as the eventual statement did. 4 hours after the loss, nothing. No social media. No interviews. No corner statement. For a fighter who has built an entire public identity on confidence, on trash talk, on projecting total invincibility, that silence was itself a signal that something had genuinely shifted. And then the statement came, and it was nothing like the Topuria the MMA world had watched for the previous 5 years. He wrote directly to Gaethje, "You said you'd leave your mark on my face, and you did." He described the vision loss specifically, round by round. He offered no excuses, no complaints about the camp, no blame directed at officials. Just a direct acknowledgement that he had been beaten, that he had one of the best training camps of his career, and that it simply was not enough on that particular night. That kind of stripped-down honesty from a fighter who has spent years projecting invincibility is genuinely rare, and it explains why the statement spread as widely as it did. But buried in that same composed, graceful statement is the line that should actually concern anyone paying close attention. "I'll heal, I'll rest, and I'll return stronger, wiser, and far more dangerous. Trust me, this story between us is far from over." Read that carefully. A fighter does not need to promise a future comeback that emphatically unless the present situation gives him reason to believe people are genuinely questioning whether that comeback happens at all. The reaction from his rivals arrived almost immediately, and it was considerably less generous than the global outpouring of respect for what he had endured. Islam Makhachev, a man who has spent years being connected to a potential superfight with Topuria and avoiding it, posted scripture to social media within hours. "He who exalts himself will be humbled." No compassion. No acknowledgement of 4 rounds of genuine punishment absorbed. Just a competitor seizing the moment. Paddy Pimblett went further, reviving an old social media jab where Topuria had mocked him after a 5-round decision win, and firing back with specific, pointed cruelty, calling him a quitter, a pretender, mocking him directly for the corner stoppage. Arman Tsarukyan added his own version of the same label. These are not neutral observers. These are three men who, for years, calculated Topuria as an obstacle too dangerous to engage directly. His vulnerability is their opening, and every one of them is taking it. That quitter label, fair or not, is doing real damage to how casual fans are now reconsidering his entire career. Was the dominance as complete as it looked, or was some of it built on careful matchmaking that avoided this specific kind of opponent? That question did not exist publicly 4 months ago. It exists now, attached permanently to his name, regardless of how this next chapter unfolds. The medical reality compounds the reputational damage in a specific mechanical way that deserves direct explanation. Orbital fractures are a well-documented liability in combat sports specifically because once a bone in that area breaks, it does not return to its original structural strength even after full healing. It becomes a permanent target. Future opponents study exactly where the previous damage occurred and aim accordingly, because that specific area of the face is now demonstrably more vulnerable to re-injury than it was before. Gaethje built an entire career identifying and exploiting precisely this kind of structural weakness in opponents. The next fighter who steps in against Topuria, whoever that ends up being, will have that information before the bell even rings. Dana White's public comments about scheduling reveal more than they might initially appear to. This is a promoter who has never been shy about fast-tracking rematches, announcing fights before contracts are finalized, or putting recently injured fighters back on cards faster than caution might suggest. And his language about Topuria was uncharacteristically gentle and explicitly non-committal. My plans are for him to go home and rest and recover. Take his time. I'm not even thinking about him fighting again. That specific restraint, from a man who almost never displays restraint about matchmaking, is itself one of the clearest signals available about how seriously the organization is treating this recovery. The realistic return timeline that has emerged from people close to Topuria's camp is early 2027 at the absolute optimistic end, with summer 2027 considered more realistic by those tracking his recovery directly. Think about what that actually represents for a 29-year-old fighter. A full calendar year, potentially longer, completely outside competition. Not training at full intensity. Not sparring. Watching the division he built his entire identity around continue moving without him. And that division is not going to wait. Justin Gaethje, sitting at the top of the lightweight rankings with the undisputed title and reportedly considering retirement sometime around 2027, has no shortage of options in the meantime. Arman Tsarukyan remains the most deserving title contender in the division. Charles Oliveira has renewed ambitions of his own. There is a genuinely plausible version of the next 18 months where Gaethje defends the title once or twice more, the belt potentially changes hands again through an entirely different contender, and by the time Topuria is medically cleared with fully healed orbital bones, the championship he is targeting is not even attached to the man who beat him anymore. That is the specific outcome his camp is reportedly most anxious to avoid. Topuria doing everything correctly in recovery, healing perfectly, returning in peak form, and still having to claw his way back through an entirely reshuffled division rather than simply collecting the rematch he is publicly promising. His specific target, according to people close to him, is an immediate rematch with Gaethje held in Spain, his home country, his crowd, conditions entirely on his terms rather than America's. Whether that fight actually materializes depends on factors largely outside his control. Whether Gaethje is even still champion by the time Topuria is cleared. Whether the commercial appetite for that specific rematch still exists 18 months from now, after an entirely new news cycle has likely taken over the division's storylines. What cannot be taken away from him, regardless of how the recovery timeline unfolds, is how he chose to respond to the worst night of his professional career. He did not deflect. He did not manufacture excuses about weight cuts or unfair conditions or compromised vision being somehow Gaethje's fault rather than simply the result of Gaethje's superior performance that night. He looked directly at the most damaging loss of his life and wrote about it with more honesty than most fighters in this sport ever managed to produce. Whether that honesty translates into the comeback he is promising, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, or considerably further down the line, remains the one question that no Instagram statement, no press conference, and no specialist's clearance can actually answer in advance. The only certainty right now is the number. 180 days. The maximum. And a fighter who built his entire identity on never losing, now learning in real time what it costs to come back from the first time he did.